Martin Scorsese's Taxi Driver wasn't just a movie about urban decay, it was a ticking time bomb that inspired a presidential assassination attempt and changed cinema forever. These are the 19 hidden details in Taxi Driver you completely missed. Number 19. Before cameras rolled in summer 1975, Robert De Niro obtained an actual taxi license and worked 12-hour overnight shifts driving real passengers around New York City. He picked up fares in Hell's Kitchen, Times Square, and the Bowery, listening to their stories and absorbing the rhythm of the streets. Some passengers recognized him from The Godfather Part 2, but most had no idea a movie star sat behind the wheel. De Niro kept a detailed notebook of conversations that would later inform Travis Bickle's alienated worldview. Martin Scorsese later said De Niro's commitment terrified him because the actor was genuinely putting himself in danger every night cruising through Manhattan's most violent neighborhoods. The city was unforgiving, violent, and unpredictable during that era. Number 18. Paul Schrader wrote the entire Taxi Driver screenplay in just 2 weeks while living out of his car in Los Angeles. He was battling his mental health, recently divorced, and drinking heavily, wandering through the city at night like the character taking shape in his mind. Schrader channeled his own mental breakdown directly onto the page, making Travis Bickle's loneliness uncomfortably autobiographical. He later admitted he was one bad night away from doing something violent himself during that fevered writing period. The script didn't feel dangerous because it was fictional. Columbia Pictures initially rejected it outright, calling it too dark and unmarketable. Producers Michael and Julia Phillips eventually brought it to Scorsese, who saw himself reflected in those disturbing pages. Number 17. Jodie Foster was only 12 years old when she was cast as Iris, creating massive controversy before shooting even began in New York. California labor laws required a welfare worker and Foster's older sister, Connie Foster, to be present during every scene involving sexual content or violence. For the most disturbing sequences, Connie actually served as Foster's body double in wider shots. Foster herself had to pass a psychological evaluation proving she could handle the mature material without suffering lasting trauma. Scorsese treated her like a professional adult on set, never condescending or attempting to shield her from the film's oppressive darkness. He trusted her intelligence to separate performance from reality. Decades later, Foster credited the role with teaching her how cinema could explore evil without endorsing it. Number 16. The iconic Mohawk Travis sports before the final massacre wasn't part of Paul Schrader's screenplay at all. It was a last-minute addition suggested by Victor Magnotta, a former Special Forces soldier working as a technical advisor on the production. Magnotta told Scorsese that soldiers in Vietnam would shave their heads into mohawks before especially dangerous missions. It was a psychological preparation for death, a visual signal that you weren't expecting to return the same person. Robert De Niro immediately loved the idea because it visualized Travis's complete psychological break from society without requiring dialogue. The mohawk became shorthand for transformation and alienation. It's since become one of cinema's most recognizable images of masculine rage and self-destruction, endlessly referenced across decades of filmmaking and television. Number 15. The MPAA threatened Taxi Driver with an X rating, the decision that would have killed its theatrical release entirely. The climactic shootout was too graphic, too realistic, too drenched in arterial spray for an R rating in 1976 America. Scorsese absolutely refused to cut a single frame, believing any reduction would betray the film's moral vision about violence's true cost. Cinematographer Michael Chapman ultimately saved the film by desaturating the color in the bloodiest sequences during post-production at the Goldwyn Studios. He drained the red slightly, making the carnage less vivid and viscerally overwhelming to censors. The MPAA reluctantly accepted this technical compromise, granting the R rating that allowed mainstream distribution across American theaters. Number 14. Legendary composer Bernard Herrmann, who had scored Citizen Kane and Psycho for Alfred Hitchcock decades earlier, completed Taxi Driver's haunting music on December 23, 1975. He died in his sleep that same night, making it his final work and inadvertent cinematic swan song. Herrmann's jazz-inflected score perfectly captured Travis's nocturnal loneliness and simmering violence with mournful saxophone lines and ominous string arrangements. The music made Travis seem tragic rather than simply psychotic, adding layers of melancholy to his descent into madness. Scorsese dedicated the finished film to Herrmann's memory, deeply aware that the composer had created something darker than anything in his 5-decade career. Herrmann knew he was dying during production. His health was failing rapidly, and he poured his remaining creative energy into one last masterpiece. Number 13. The most quoted scene in Taxi Driver was never written by Paul Schrader at all. Robert De Niro improvised the entire mirror confrontation with only the vaguest direction from Scorsese guiding him through the moment. The script simply read, Travis talks to himself in the mirror, without providing any specific dialogue whatsoever. De Niro channeled the loneliness and narcissism of someone so isolated they've become their own only family audience. He drew inspiration from Bruce Springsteen's aggressive stage presence and the hostile posturing he'd witnessed from street hustlers working Times Square. Scorsese let the camera roll for multiple takes, instinctively knowing De Niro was channeling something genuinely unsettling. The scene has been parodied countless times across decades of television and film, referenced endlessly in American pop culture. Number 12. The palpable tension between Travis and Betsy wasn't just exceptional acting on screen. Robert De Niro and Sybil Shepherd genuinely disliked each other throughout production, barely speaking between takes unless absolutely necessary for scenes. Shepherd was romantically involved with Martin Scorsese at the time, creating an uncomfortable dynamic where the director was dating one lead while managing the other. De Niro felt Shepherd wasn't taking the role seriously enough, treating it like a glamorous modeling assignment rather than legitimate character work. Shepherd thought De Niro was pretentious and unnecessarily methodical, staying rigidly in character even during lunch breaks at the Belmore cafeteria on Park Avenue South. Scorsese quietly used their mutual contempt to fuel the excruciating awkwardness of Travis and Betsy's disastrous coffee date sequence in the film. Number 11. The iconic checker cab Travis drives throughout the film wasn't an operational New York City taxi when production began in summer 1975. It was a decommissioned vehicle purchased outright by the production and meticulously repainted to look authentic for street photography throughout Manhattan's most dangerous neighborhoods at night. Real taxi medallions were extremely expensive to rent for the extended night shooting schedule Scorsese demanded throughout the city's most dangerous neighborhoods. Production designer Charles Rosen modified the interior extensively to accommodate bulky camera equipment while maintaining the claustrophobic feel of an actual working cab. Robert De Niro insisted on practicing alone in the cab for weeks before filming officially began, making every movement behind the wheel feel instinctive and natural. Number 10. On March 30th, 1981, John Hinckley Jr. attempted to assassinate President Ronald Reagan specifically to impress Jodie Foster after becoming dangerously obsessed with Taxi Driver. He'd watched the film at least 15 times, gradually identifying completely with Travis Bickle's alienation and violent fantasies about political assassination and heroic recognition. Hinckley wrote numerous letters to Foster at Yale University, explicitly referencing the film and threatening to recreate Travis's assassination attempt on Senator Palantine. Foster went into hiding for months while Scorsese publicly defended the film's moral complexity against reductive readings. Scorsese argued the film wasn't a blueprint for violence, but a warning about isolation and the dangerous fantasies lonely men construct when disconnected from reality. The shooting forever changed Hollywood's responsibility debates. Number 9. Martin Scorsese makes a brief but absolutely unforgettable cameo as a passenger who graphically describes his plan to murder his unfaithful wife with a .44 Magnum. The disturbing scene was originally intended for George Mamoli, another actor, but scheduling conflicts forced Scorsese to step in at the absolute last minute during night shooting in the city. His manic, deeply uncomfortable performance adds bizarre contextual weight, revealing the director's own psychological fascination with Travis's mindset and violent ideation. Scorsese's character sits shrouded in darkness, describing graphic violence in clinical detail, while Travis listens in complete silence, creating pure cinematic tension without resolution. The scene was filmed in a single night on location in Manhattan's West Village. His intensity shocked even the veteran crew. Number 8. Presidential candidate Charles Palantine was deliberately written as a composite of several 1970s political figures, particularly Robert Kennedy and George Wallace, by screenwriter Paul Schrader. The film was shot during the actual 1976 presidential campaign, with real political signage accidentally visible in Times Square background shots throughout the film. Schrader was deeply fascinated by how political movements simultaneously attracted both genuine idealists and dangerous lunatics seeking purpose through violence. Travis's obsessive fixation on Palantine reflects the era's profound disillusionment after Vietnam, Watergate, and economic collapse had shattered faith in American institutions. The assassination subplot felt frighteningly plausible because America had already witnessed multiple high-profile political murders in recent memory. The threat wasn't fictional. It was a documentary dressed in narrative clothing, reflecting real national trauma and paranoia. Number 7. Harvey Keitel prepared extensively for his role as Pimp Sport by spending months hanging out with actual pimps working Times Square in Manhattan. He carefully studied their body language, their manipulation tactics, and the casual cruelty they performed as routine business strategy on the streets every single night. Keitel even wore Sport's distinctive costume around New York between shoots, staying in character to viscerally understand how the role changed his public interactions. He later admitted playing Sport made him feel genuinely contaminated, like he'd absorbed something toxic that took many months to fully shake off afterward. Martin Scorsese actively encouraged this extreme commitment, knowing Sport needed to feel predatory rather than stereotypical or cartoonish. The performance haunted Keitel for years afterward. Number 6. The climactic apartment shootout required over 300 individual blood packs meticulously rigged throughout the cramped set at Goldwyn Studios in Hollywood by the special effects team. Special effects supervisor Dick Smith designed custom explosive charges that would spray blood in realistic arcs rather than simple splatter effects seen in other films. The actors wore extensive protection under their costumes, but the simulated violence still felt disturbingly real during actual filming. Robert De Niro performed most of his own stunts during the brutal sequence, including the moment where Travis takes a bullet directly to the neck. The whole sequence took 4 entire nights to shoot with painstaking attention to the precise choreography of death and violence. Each squib was individually timed and tested. Number 5. Martin Scorsese was drowning in powder addiction throughout Taxi Driver's entire production, directly fueling the film's manic energy and paranoid atmosphere throughout. He later admitted publicly he was using daily, barely sleeping, and actively pushing himself toward complete physical collapse throughout the summer 1975 shoot in New York. The constant substance use dangerously intensified his natural obsessiveness, leading to marathon editing sessions and compulsive script revisions even during active filming. Scorsese's own deteriorating mental state disturbingly mirrored Travis's psychological unraveling, creating uncomfortable parallels between director and character throughout production. He nearly passed from an overdose shortly after completing The Last Waltz in 1978, finally forcing him into sobriety. Editor Thelma Schoonmaker later said she watched Scorsese destroy himself during this period, unable to intervene effectively despite genuine concern. Number 4. When Travis takes Betsy to a pornographic movie theater in Times Square, Martin Scorsese filmed inside actual adult theaters operating in 1975 Manhattan. The Times Square of that era was a genuine war zone of illegal activity and adult entertainment barely regulated by overwhelmed New York authorities. Scorsese captured the area's authentic oppressive sleaze before decades of aggressive gentrification eventually sanitized it into a family-friendly tourist destination. The marquees, the theaters, the predatory street life, all real documentation of the city's most dangerous neighborhood. Production manager Philip Goldfarb had to hire private security specifically to protect expensive equipment during night shoots on notoriously dangerous 42nd Street. The scene works because Betsy's visible horror feels completely justified by the genuine seediness and threat surrounding her in that moment on screen. Number 3. Comedian Albert Brooks played Tom, the campaign worker who awkwardly befriends Travis, and improvised virtually all of his dialogue throughout filming in New York. Brooks brought unexpected, necessary humor to the film's otherwise oppressive darkness, providing brief relief from Travis's relentless intensity with naturalistic awkwardness. Martin Scorsese actively encouraged Brooks to work completely off-script, knowing his exceptional comedic timing would make the campaign office sequences feel more authentic and lived in. The scene where Tom desperately tries making uncomfortable small talk with Travis perfectly captures two fundamentally incompatible people, unable to genuinely connect despite good intentions. Brooks later admitted working opposite Robert De Niro was deeply intimidating because the method actor never broke character between takes on set. Number 2. Martin Scorsese and Paul Schrader intentionally left Travis's survival frustratingly ambiguous, strongly suggesting the final scene might be a dying fantasy rather than reality. The overhead camera movement during the shootout deliberately mirrors a soul leaving a body, implying Travis dies and merely imagines his subsequent redemption. His miraculous recovery, sudden media celebration, and Betsy's unexpected respect seem too perfect, too conveniently redemptive for the film's deeply cynical worldview throughout its entire runtime. Scorsese later confirmed they carefully designed the ending to support multiple valid interpretations without definitively resolving which reading is correct. Some critics firmly believe Travis died and the epilogue represents heaven or delusion, while others accept it as literal survival and redemption through violence. Number 1. Despite eventually becoming one of cinema's most influential and endlessly studied films, Taxi Driver had a budget of only $1.9 million. Columbia Pictures gave Martin Scorsese an extremely minimal budget and nearly complete creative freedom, expecting a small character study with severely limited commercial appeal. Producers Michael and Julia Phillips fought hard to secure even that modest funding from skeptical studio executives who doubted its viability. The tight budget forced creative solutions like shooting primarily at night, when location permits were significantly cheaper and streets more accessible throughout Manhattan. The film eventually earned over $28 million at the box office and fundamentally changed cinema forever, influencing countless filmmakers for decades to come. It proved low budgets could yield masterpieces. Taxi Driver remains a dangerous mirror reflecting America's loneliest impulses and ugliest fantasies about redemption through violence. It's a film that refuses easy answers and romanticizes absolutely nothing. Which hidden detail shocked you most, and what classic film should we dissect next?